The European Council President Donald Tusk quoted the British artist John Lennon as he was telling reporters he still imagined a possibility that the UK remains as part of the European Union. While discussing the different possible outcomes of Brexit negotiations at a news conference after meeting the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, Mr. Tusk said that the EU itself had been built on dreams that seemed impossible to achieve. In a letter sent to EU leaders before their two-day summit, Mr. Tusk said the bloc might slowly be at a turning point, with election results suggesting waning momentum in anti-EU populism.
Some of my British friends have even asked me whether Brexit could be reversed and whether I could imagine an outcome where the UK stays part of the EU. I told them that, in fact, the European Union was built on dreams that seemed impossible to achieve. So, who knows? You may say, I am a dreamer, but I am not the only one.
EU leaders have plenty to discuss at their monthly EU summit. Terrorism, the UK's withdrawal from the EU, migration. They're just three of a broad raft of issues that need untangling, and solutions have to be found as well. Let's get the latest now from Mariam Zaidi. She joins us now live from Brussels with more data on this story. Let's start with a focus on migration now. EU leaders agreed to a mandatory relocation program across the bloc in 2015. But countries like Poland and Hungary, they're clearly not complying. Italy and Greece are demanding cuts in funding to those two countries as a result. But will they get their way?
Hi, Rama. Well, I don't really think so. The figures just don't lie. Around 20,000 refugees have been relocated to date out of what should have been double that. And central EU countries are the ones in particular who are at fault because they staunchly oppose any quotas. They don't believe in it, and they don't want the burden of having to house refugees. And what they put forward instead is securing the EU's external border. I've also spoken to Polish critics of the policy, and they say that it's a cultural thing, that people there want to maintain their way of life. So read into that what you will. So it's definitely caused a rift in the EU. The European Commission, of course, launched a legal case against Poland, Hungary and the Czech Republic for refusing to take in asylum seekers, but it hasn't really produced any results. The Commission, of course, is though backed by members Germany and France, but it's unlikely that this impasse with Eastern members will be broken during this summit, or in fact anytime soon. And on Italy and Greece's calls for funding to be cut, well, they just don't have the muscle to get that done, really.
Indeed. Let's talk about things that actually have worked. Last year's deal with Turkey did significantly cut traffic into the EU. Libya is currently volatile, fair enough, but how can the EU achieve a similar effect in Africa?
Well, absolutely no. That deal with Turkey was really a springboard to the EU doing other deals with third countries on migration, to try to stem the flow of migrants to the EU. And despite Libya being in crisis, as you were saying, that partnership is producing results. And this is what the EU Foreign Affairs Chief Federica Mogherini had to say on migration policy earlier on today at the EU summit. Let's listen in.
Internally, we still have some divisions or problems, but for sure on the external actions we have been united, and we are having some first important results. We've managed to assist and help more than 4,500 migrants to return to their home countries voluntarily, protecting their rights and their lives, but also bringing them back whenever they wanted to.
So letting those people come back whenever they wanted to. That was Federica Mogherini on the partnership with Libya. Now, the EU is, of course, upping the ante on training Libyan Navy Coast Guards, and on Africa in general. We are seeing more progress. A year ago, the EU chose 5 African nations, so Ethiopia, Niger, Nigeria, Mali and Senegal, as a testing ground for its new policy of engaging with African nations over migration. And the results are there. At this EU summit, leaders will continue to review their efforts to curb migration along the central Mediterranean route, and we should hear more action on migration on Friday. Rama, back to you.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Looking forward to seeing what comes out of that summit. That's Mariam Zaidi, of course, live in Brussels.